Welcome back to the 312 Show. I'm your host, Ollie Katz, here alongside Zach Joshua. Today, we have an amazing guest in for the episode today. We have Josh McCabe, owner and the runner of Boxing News Daily on Instagram. Say what's up, Josh.
All right, how are you?
Great. Thanks so much for being on the show today. Real quick before we get into this, you care to give a shout out to any of your social media or whatever you want to plug?
Shout out to irishboxing.com. It's a site I write for as I'm a journalist. I write about boxing as well, mainly Irish media. And just a shout out to my own page, Boxing News Daily on Instagram.
Yep.
There you go. You heard it here first. All right, let's get into this. There's no other fitting way to conduct an interview, especially about boxing, one of the most, spontaneous sports that there is, with just, getting right into it. So I guess I'll ask the first question. And it's sort of in the forefront of every combat sport fan's mind. And that is Mike Tyson's comeback.
Of course.
We've seen this gigantic transformation from Iron Mike. And so as a boxing fan, what do you make of this? Like, is this legit?
Well, it seems the contracts have been signed, so it seems pretty legit. And it's a fight between two legends, that we would have loved to see maybe 20 years ago. As a fan, it's going to be good to see as it's an exhibition, but as they're both boxing legends, you don't want to see any of them get hurt. And that's the thing, I think, because casual fans will think, oh, it's Mike Tyson coming back and Roy Jones Jr., but they don't realise these guys' age and the potential risks that can come in and how tough of a sport boxing is and the things that could happen if either one of these guys gets hurt, and, we don't want to see that.
Yeah, for sure. What are your predictions for the fight?
There's a lot of rules that are being in place. If either fighter gets a cut, the fight is going to be stopped straight away, from what I've been told anyway. So, it's an exhibition fight, so probably more than likely going to go to a decision. I'm going to go Roy Jones Jr. I think the speed he has in his prime was unbelievable, but you can never write off Mike Tyson, but coming towards the end of his career, he was slow and sluggish, and, going to prison affected him a lot. But then again, he still has that power, and that's one of the last things to leave as a boxer. So it's a toss-up, really, but I'm going with Roy Jones.
Yeah, you think it'll go into decision just because they're not going to knock each other out?
Yeah, I think they're going to be I think it's going to be a passive fight.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I don't think they're going to go in all guns blazing and try and knock each other out. I think there might be a bit of showmanship for the fans, trying to get the crowd rallied up. If there is a crowd, hopefully, even a small one at least. Yeah, I think there'll be a little bit of showmanship, but it's all respect. And mainly, if I'm being honest, it's probably just a cash grab.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's my opinion on these cash grab fights, and we'll get into another one in the second that's been very, very much so highly covered by the media. But with these cash grab fights, does Mike Tyson still care about the benefit of the sport of boxing? Because you have to ask this to yourself, because Mike Tyson in his prime, and I watched the documentary called Chasing Tyson recently, which is a fantastic documentary. It's a 30 for 30, highly recommended. Mike Tyson was one of those players who refused to lose. And he was a fighter that losing wasn't really something that he could do. And so do you think, and back then, the idea of a cash grab was a lot less prominent, as it seemed in the documentary, than it is nowadays. Obviously, with guys like Floyd Mayweather, he's all about the money. That's his go-to saying. He's Floyd Money Mayweather. He's all about the money. Do you think that Mike Tyson in this huge cash grab fight against Roy Jones is a smart idea for him in his career? Be honest.
Yeah. To be honest, with the stipulations that are in place, I don't think much can go wrong, and I don't think either fighter can get hurt that badly. Which is a good thing, you know, because we get to see two legends go in there and mix up, you know, have a bit of fun. And what's mainly going to be a glorified spar, if we're being honest. It's going to be a glorified sparring contest. But yeah, I think it's, you know, they're going in to have a bit of fun and mix it up. As long as neither of them gets hurt, I don't see the real problem with it. But I think most people can read between the lines and see that, as you were saying, it's a massive cash grab fight.
Yeah. And also the undercard will feature Nate Robinson versus Jake Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Jake Paul is a great boxer for being a YouTube star, for only training for a couple years, right? I got Jake Paul beating Nate Robinson. I don't think you could come into boxing with a couple months of training and beat a guy who's trained for a few years. What are your thoughts?
You know, I respect anyone that is willing to step in a boxing ring. You know, it's one of the most daunting things that you can ever do. So, you know, a lot of professional boxers, you know, look down on these YouTubers coming in and taking the spotlight. In my opinion, fair play to them. You know, let them go out, let them have a bit of fun. If they're willing to put in training and not sacrifice the integrity of the sport, let them go ahead and do it. They have big platforms, and it's only going to make the sport of boxing bigger, which is a good thing. In terms of the fight, being on the undercard is great. You know, it'll bring in more money for Mike and Roy, which is good for them too. And, you know, for the YouTubers and the YouTube stars, I think Nate Robinson was a footballer, was he?
Yeah, basketball.
Yeah. You know, they're both going to have big followings, and there's a lot of younger kids that watch them and look up to them. And if they watch that fight and they see their favorite YouTuber, Jake Paul, stepping into a ring saying, "Oh, I want to go boxing," you know, we could have the next.
Yeah, for sure.
You just never know.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. So I watched Jake Paul. I've no shame in saying that I watched Jake Paul's fight, his pay-per-view, his first professional debut against a Nissan Gibb.
Yeah.
Where he knocked him out in the first round. And as a fan of boxing, that didn't really look so right.
No, it was an awkward fight to watch, to be honest. Because you're watching the fight. Go ahead.
But Jake Paul, he knocked him out in the first round, but he didn't really look. It didn't look like he knew what he was doing. And I think with boxing, like, the joy in the art form that boxing is a martial art, it's you have to know what you're doing. Like, it's something that people train for all their life. And then there's this rich YouTuber guy saying, all right, I want to box because it makes me look cool and it'll get me some money. And he steps into the ring and he looks like a chicken without a head, and he knocks this guy out, but he throws the most uneducated punches with the most unorthodox style, and it doesn't look good.
I don't think it was him with the unorthodox style. It was the guy who was fighting. Did you see the guy who was fighting?
Exactly. It doesn't – it just goes to show, though, whoever it was, like, they don't know how to fight. They know how to make money and put on a show. And I think as a boxing fan, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's pretty sad to see, like, your sport coming to that. So can you kind of elaborate on what that means to you?
Yeah, you know, as a boxing fan, you know, I've been a boxing fan for roughly about 5-6 years. About 5-6 years. I've competed in some boxing fights, and I've trained boxing. And, you know, as you're saying, it is an art. It's an art form. And, you know, that's what I think. I was talking to a lot of professional boxers in Ireland, and I'm saying, what do you think about the YouTubers coming in and stepping on the spotlight? And they're saying they don't really agree with it because these guys have trained their whole lives, and this is everything to them. And these guys that are coming in, YouTubers that have a big following, are coming in and making serious amounts of money to come in, and they don't really know how to fight, and they don't respect boxing. Like, they're training to fight, but they don't respect it, and they don't know what it means. Because I know fighters that have put blood, sweat, and tears in, proper fighters that would, in their whole careers, wouldn't have made as much money as Jake Paul would have made in that fight. And that's, I think, is one of the most disrespectful things. And I think it's why a lot of hardcore boxing fans don't have that respect for YouTubers that go in and fight.
Right. And it's also, like you said, I think the Paul brothers care about boxing because they, Logan Paul, Jake's older brother, he's very into the training thing. He was very serious in his camp leading up to the fight with KSI. But, the guys that they're fighting, I really don't think it's that serious. And you can tell with the guy that Jake Paul fought. Who did Jake Paul fight?
Anissan
Gid.
Oh, my God.
His friend, he's a YouTuber as well.
I mean, he clearly did not take training seriously. I mean, if you saw his stance, this dude was like crouched down, like in a squat position, throwing, not, like you said, uneducated punches. And I think that was just embarrassing. I mean,
yeah,
I think you guys could agree.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I mean. I've no problem with YouTubers stepping in as I said, they're giving a bigger spotlight to boxing. I've no problem doing it if they're going to take the sport seriously. And I don't believe they should be getting paid what they do get paid, because, it's hard enough to get paid in boxing, because you get what you're getting paid to fight. You have to pay your coaches, your training, all your recovery and stuff like that. It's hard enough to make money. So these guys are coming in and making, I think, for the Logan Paul KSI fight, I think the reported, like, the fees were ridiculous money.
Oh, yeah.
Over $1 million each, at least, I think, was guaranteed in the contracts, which is, that's a dream payday for most professional boxers. And that's what I kind of don't agree with, but, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Right. So let me ask you this. The sport of boxing has become more or less of a form of entertainment over the last 10 or so years. Yeah. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You see all these diehard, soccer fans, for instance, and all their favorite players are there to put on a show, right? And boxing has sort of becomes an outlet for these fighters to make a name for themselves. And doing that through social media, doing that from having the biggest ego during pre-fight, sit downs and discussions and weigh-ins and whatnot. But going back to these amateur fighters, Logan Paul and KSI at a press conference looked like the biggest idiots I've ever seen in my entire life. They made boxing look like a sissy sport, and they made it look like it was all just for them to start complaining and to insult one another and not show it off in the ring at the end of the day. Like they were just talking about, the contract, insulting one another, showing no respect for, one another and how much work one another has put in. And you see these real fighters respecting one another. And so do you think that obviously with YouTubers and all these just general fighters with big egos, obviously helping the sport, like people love Conor McGregor, obviously because he's a great fighter, but because of what he brings to the sport and he's fun to watch. But do you think that at a certain point it gets out of hand to the point where it comes away from this beautiful art form?
Yeah, it does. And some fighters go over the top with it, but ego sells in this day and age. You've seen it. Some of the biggest fighter in the world at the moment, I'd say, is Conor McGregor. His following is huge, especially over here in Ireland.
Yeah.
His following is absolutely massive. And half credit to his fight and half credit to his mouth. He talks a good game, and he can back it up. And that's the thing with the KSI Logan fight. They talked a lot before the fight, and then they went in and I think KSI was throwing windmills and Logan was,
Yeah.
you know, it was a weird fight to watch.
And
Because,
go on. You got it.
because on the undercard there was 2 world title fights on the KSI Logan card. Billy Joe Saunders, an English fella, fought, and Devin Haney fought. They both fought for world titles. They both got paid less than KSI and Logan Paul.
Yep.
And that's what pissed me off, you know, because these fighters have trained their whole lives and they're fighting for a world title. The biggest honor you can get as a professional boxer is fighting for a world title. And these YouTubers are coming in their first professional fights, and because they have that big of a following and they're getting paid more than you, and, you know, that's the power of social media. You know, if you can have a big following and if you're a big YouTuber, you're going to sell more fights, you know? And that's why social media has changed the game in boxing completely.
And you're also putting your life on the line. Every second you're in that ring, you can very much cause permanent brain damage. You know, God forbid, you know, you can die. I mean, it's life or death in that ring, you know? And I think the fact that, you know, real fighters are getting paid less than these YouTubers that are just doing it for the views, it's sad.
And, you know, no disrespect to KSI or Logan, you know, they went in, they put on a show and they sold a lot of pay-per-views, but I just don't think the pay they got over the professional fighters was right.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion.
You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's steer away from this social boxing, and let's talk more about your personal opinion. Right, this is a lot of, you know, global stuff. But from your personal take, who is the next Floyd Mayweather? Who is the next Mike Tyson? Who has that it factor that they can win fights, make money, and sell pay-per-views? Who is that next guy for boxing?
That's a very hard question. You know, there's the fight coming up. I don't know if you know them, but Vasily Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez are fighting. I don't know if you know Lomachenko, but he's one of the most decorated amateurs of all time.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
And, you know, they call him the Matrix. You know, in my opinion, he's the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world. And one of the guys that you were saying that has this if factor and who's going to make money is Teofimo Lopez. You know, he has a connection with hardcore fans because he's very good at what he does. He's a great boxer. He's great knockout power, which appeals to the casuals. And he also appeals to the younger fan bases. You know, he does video game dances after he wins. And, you know, he's developed a big following in the past 2 years. And, you know, he's kind of, if he beats Lomachenko, which I think it's a slim chance he has, but if he beats Lomachenko, I think he could go on to unforeseen heights. You know, he could be that next guy.
So that's right. And every sport is sort of, we're in a transitional period with sports. It's a new decade, and we see new guys emerging every single season. And every single, you know, month even, you see these new guys with the, you know, the mainstream social media and whatnot. People, you know, are popping into the limelight. But let's talk about some household names. Okay, there's a fight coming up: Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury.
Yes.
I mean, excuse me. Yeah, right. Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. Who's winning? Because these are both freak of nature fighters. How can you distinguish guys like Tyson Fury, who just beat Deontay Wilder, widely considered one of the greatest fighters in the world, and he absolutely destroyed him?
Yep.
He crushed him. That was brutal. That was I can't even put it into words how badly Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder.
It was unbelievable.
But Anthony Joshua just came out with a statement saying that Deontay Wilder doesn't punch hard enough to keep Tyson Fury down. Does Anthony Joshua now have what it takes? to beat Tyson Fury, the king of all boxing right now?
No. Simply just, he doesn't, in my opinion, what Fury has done in the past 3 years is unbelievable.
Yep.
He beat Vladimir Klitschko in his back garden, who was widely considered one of the best heavyweights. He was a 10-year champion, he beat everyone. And Fury went to his backyard in Germany and he beat him for 12 rounds and he took his title. And then Fury reached that height and, he came out and said he had depression, he started taking a lot of drugs and he ballooned up to about 28 stone. And then the slow road came back and, he got himself down in weight again. He came back and he beat, as you said, the best heavyweight in the world at the time, again in his own backyard, and dominated him. Joshua was knocked out by Andy Ruiz Jr. And no disrespect to Joshua, he's a great fighter, but I just don't think he has what it takes to beat Tyson Fury. I think when it's all said and done and Fury retires, I think he will be regarded as highly as in maybe as what we see Muhammad Ali. I think that could be Tyson Fury in 50 years. That's how much I rate Tyson Fury.
Wow, that is a hot take.
Yeah. I mean, Tyson Fury, my thing with him, he obviously has so much power, but he may not have the most power, but his striking, his precision striking, he knows what he's throwing and he doesn't overthrow. He does,
his boxing IQ is unbelievable.
Yeah, he'll find that window and he'll get you right in the nose. I mean, that's how he beat Wilder. I mean, he just the precision striking. The one guy that I can compare him to, I watched some UFC is Israel Adesanya.
Yeah.
So Adesanya does not look. He's a skinny dude. He does not look like he's a hard striker. But that just precision striking is just so much more important than power.
I'm a big UFC fan as well. I can completely agree with that. The comparison there, his IQ is unbelievable as well in his sport, and I think Adesanya is actually 5-0 in boxing as well.
Yeah. So you're a UFC fan?
Both, yeah, UFC and boxing.
Wow. Because normally, boxing fans, don't really like UFC. I'm a huge UFC fan. The card last night was probably one of the best cards I've ever seen.
Great card.
Stacked.
No, for a fight night, it was unbelievable.
Yeah. The main event wasn't as good as the fights before, but, I think the rest of them definitely made up for it. Yeah, but back to that, tactical striking. I think a lot of guys in the UFC, my guy, Jorge Masvidal, people regard him as like the best boxer in the UFC. I think, it's just about the striking, tactical striking.
I think a lot of them UFC guys have been itching to come over and fight Canelo. One of the biggest. I think, it was Masvidal. Masvidal called out Canelo as Canelo is promoted by Oscar De La Hoya, and as you probably know as a UFC fan, Dana White does not like Oscar De La Hoya.
Does not like Oscar De La Hoya. So, not at all.
That could bring in big money. I'd be completely here to see that. I know a lot of boxing fans again would complain like, oh, he's not a proper boxer. I'd love to see that crossover. It'd be unbelievable. Yeah,
just like Conor and Floyd.
Yeah.
Right. So personally, I am a new UFC fan. But in the brief period and followed the sport, it's blows my mind. It's a fantastic sport. And as a previous fan of boxing, I like to compare the overlaps in the fighting styles of the UFC and boxing. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed, and I'm going to pull it up and back to Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury stands 6'9", and he fights at 240. He fought at 245 against Wilder. That is insane. 6'9" as a fighter. And you usually see these in comparison to the UFC. The average height in the UFC is a lot smaller than a heavyweight in UFC is a lot smaller in height than a heavyweight in boxing. Like, for instance, take a John Jones, widely considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. John Jones, what does he stand? No more than 6 foot, right?
John Jones 6'4".
6'4".
6'4"?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, even still. 6'4" compared to 6'9", especially fighting at the same weight, is insane, right? And yet these guys are so unbelievably quick. Tyson Fury does not stop moving. You know, John Jones does not stop moving regardless of if he can take shots or not. And that blows my mind. Even if you go a little bit downwards in weight, for instance, Canelo Alvarez compared to like a Khabib or a Masvidal or a McGregor. These guys are so fast and they can strike so hard regardless of how big they are. And they can stand up to another person their size and just pick them up to shreds. And that, I think, is what interests me most about boxing and UFC alike. Like, no matter what they're doing, the best of the best are performing the same sort of tactical fighting against their opponents. And that is so mind-blowing to me, how even in UFC, when they're using 4-ounce gloves and they can use their feet and submissions, they overlap so much. And so I wanted to ask you, like, as both a fan of boxing and UFC, what do you think is the biggest overlap between the two, and why do you think it's so important?
The warrior spirit that they both have. You know, you have to be a different breed of human to step into a professional boxing ring or to step in a UFC cage. You know, it has to be absolutely terrifying. You know, I've had some amateur fights, and you know, it's terrifying even at them. But to get in and know that realistically, you're getting paid as a contract killer. Your job is to go in there and hit someone until they're knocked out cold, and that's your job. You're being paid as a professional hitman, and that to go in there against another guy or another girl that's as hungry as you to go in there and make an out of themselves, and you know that they're coming to try and kill you, it's unbelievable how they can go in and be so composed. And you know, it's what keeps the sport so entertaining, and it's what keeps people attracted to the sport.
Yeah. Going back to Tyson Fury, I was thinking about kind of the matchup. I would want to see a Tyson Fury, Stipe Miocic heavyweight bout. I mean, I think it would have to be in boxing because Tyson Fury, I don't think has any MMA background whatsoever.
I think he was training a little bit about a year ago. I think there was some
really?
training. He was doing some leg kicks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not too serious.
But you know, I think that would be a great fight. I was gonna say Overeem, but I think Overeem would kick his ass, honestly. Just because Overeem's ground game is just so strong. But in a boxing match, Tyson, I think, would take all of them.
Yeah, that's why I don't think any UFC fighter that's coming over to boxing isn't beating Tyson. And I think about 80% of UFC fighters are beating Tyson Fury in an octagon. And that's just, it's a lot of people try and compare the sports all the time. And, you know, there is comparisons, but at the end of the day, it's two completely different sports.
Yeah.
You know, you can't compare them, you know, and that's what I think fans should respect both sets of fighters and what they choose to do, because you know it's daunting enough going in. So just respect the fighters.
When you step into the octagon against a guy like Conor McGregor, you have to expect nothing less than to get your head ripped off.
Yeah,
that's the nature of the sport. And while boxing is competitive in that sense, it is nothing like UFC. In the sense that, you know, everything's fair game in UFC. In boxing, you have to be a lot more tactical with a lot less of your body. And so it astonishes me, like, how these people can just go into the ring constantly against Khabib, McGregor, Masvidal, and say I very well might sustain a life-threatening injury in this fight, and I just have to go do it. And I think that's absent nowadays in boxing. And I think while it maybe was sort of more of a prominent mindset back then, Now, UFC it's a different breed, like you said. These guys are crazy. And while the guys in boxing are so meticulous and about, how they can win the fight, whereas UFC, it all boils down to who is gonna just be, who wants to rip the other guy's head off more, and who really wants to see themselves just annihilate the other human being. That's how you win fights. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is that like sort of fled boxing or not really?
I think that's why a lot more people are transitioning over to watching UFC than they are boxing now. If you're coming in to watch combat sports, a lot of people are turning to the UFC as, it's more exciting, as people saying, no respect to, obviously I love boxing. That's my whole Instagram page. And, I love the sport to pieces, but a lot of fans think that the UFC is more exciting. And again, in the UFC, the best fight the best. And in boxing, we don't really see that anymore. 30 years ago, maybe the best fought the best. You look at Ali's generation and they all fought each other, and Sugar Ray Leonard and Duran, they all fought each other, and the best fought the best. And now everyone cares about records and businesses and how much money you're going to make from a fight, and, rehydration clauses and stuff like that. It's gone more of a business, and I think that's what's turning a lot more fans towards UFC.
Yeah, and I think, I'm going to touch on something that Joe Rogan said. A reason why they can't get these big fighters to fight each other in boxing is there's like too many belts out there. It's not one organized boxing league. It's, a bunch of world titles that you can have, and like it's more about the money. There's not really contracts. You're not, it's just a lot more confusing. And I think UFC, Dana White and his crew his matchmaking crew do a great job of, setting these matchups up. And, they know who to match up together. They know what the fans want. They let kind of the fighters choose who they want to fight a little bit in the call outs after the fight. So I think he does a great job with that. And that's a reason why, they can't get these big fighters to fight.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and you look at next week's UFC as an example, two of Dana's biggest stars and the UFC's biggest stars, Paulo Costa and Israel Adesanya, both undefeated and willing to go in there and risk their undefeated records on each other. And, you just don't see that in boxing anymore. People protect their records and they fight their mandatory fighters. And, I wouldn't say easy routes, because no boxing fight is easy, but they kind of take easy routes and they vacate belts. They don't fight people. And that's why you see more 8 division world champions in boxing and only 1 division champions in the UFC.
Yep.
So as a final, go on the record and ask this, because it's something that me and Zach have wondered for a while after working out with a mixed martial arts coach, Jeffrey Hawks. Can you please explain the cadence that fighters make after throwing a punch? Like for instance, our coach he always goes, like he'll throw a punch and he'll go like, "Hey!" Can you please explain why they do that?
It really differs from player to player. I've been at boxing events now. I've been at a good few of them, and most fighters don't make that scream after they hit someone, but you hear it a lot, and people are like, you don't really know why they're doing it. It's just a thought habit, and it's like, it's a really interesting one. Sometimes it's funny because some of these guys are screaming at the top of their lungs after throwing every single punch, and it's
Get shot!
Exactly that.
Whenever the round ends, he goes, "Hey!" It's so great, and it adds this sort of element of swagger, but it is so weird.
100% agree.
I mean, it's like tennis, you're just putting in so much effort to those punches, and you gotta scream something. Yeah, so I think
All right.
I think
Well,
I
thank
think
you
as a
so
final,
much.
I think we could ask one more question to wrap
more
this
quick one.
up. You know, give us your favorite boxer of all time or now, whatever you want, and reason why.
I'll do both. Of all time, Muhammad Ali. You can see him up there on the wall.
I got that same poster right in front of me.
It's just an iconic picture, and obviously he's an amazing fighter. His movement back then was like he's unbelievable for his time frame and what he did outside of the sport. For politics and all stuff like that. And I think that's what makes him so iconic. And currently, it's a tough one. I have to say Lomachenko. His movement is just unbelievable. He's fantastic to watch. And I just don't think there's anyone as exciting as him, but we can see what happens because there's always new stars coming up.
Yeah. All right. That was a great answer. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. This was an awesome episode. I think we'll for sure have you on again.
I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, breaking down some UFC fights or some boxing fights. I think that would be great. This has been the 312 Show. Make sure to go follow us on Instagram at the 312 Show.
Amazing.
Make sure to go follow Josh's Instagram account, Boxing News Daily, to get all the boxing news. You post some funny stuff, some news. It's a really great account. Actually, Saquon Barkley follows the account, which I saw, which is awesome. But that's it. Thank you for listening. This has been the 312 Show.